Hi there, guys. Bukowski Boy 687 here, and I just thought maybe a little introduction to the channel. It's kind of the first video on the channel, and I thought maybe a little introduction. So I'm Bukowski Boy, and this is kind of we're going to talk about Charles Bukowski and kind of all of his works, all of the things he put out. His kind of um, his kind of novelistic writing, his more like essay based writing. He wrote some movies which we'll talk about in here as well, just kind of like the whole kind of um thing. So I thought a good way to say hello to the world and talk about that is through On Rye, which I don't have. I couldn't find the copy that I have, but um, this is kind of his biggest, piece of content. This is kind of his biggest work, and I think it's, a big one to start with, big one to talk about. Anyone who's kind of wanting to get into Bukowski would start out kind of around this one. And I thought it would be, if we talk about that, it would be a good place to talk about kind of why we like Charles Bukowski and how we kind of feel about that. So this is it's kind of like his big one. Like I say, it's kind of like his it, or his carry, or his it. And it has that kind of like feeling of like a beat novel, like you think about Jack Kerouac, you think about William Burroughs, or Ginsberg, or maybe even like a Dylan Thomas, or someone, maybe not Dylan Thomas, but the other three. You kind of like think, but I think Kerouac's probably bigger. I think Kerouac's probably a bigger one to compare to, because it has that kind of semi autobiographical feeling in it. It's kind of about him, but not about him, if that makes sense. It's Henry Chibinski, who is the main character, Ham and Rye. Obviously, not Charles Bukowski. That's a different. Sorry, the dog is eating. She picks when I'm trying to. Okay. Um, Henry Chibinski's kind of the. Obviously, he's a different name, but he kind of has the same kind of backstory of Bukowski. In that kind of, you know, Sal Paradise isn't Jack Kerouac's. Isn't it Jack Kerouac, not Sal Paradise? But it is about him in that way. And there's one of the big, I would say, connection between a kind of a beat novel and a Ham and Rye, and that's the kind of the prose that really, it's descriptive and it flows and it feels like, poetry adjacent. Obviously, a lot of famous poems from Book. There's, Bluebird, stuff like that. Really famous poems. So that kind of bleeds into how he writes. Just normal. And I think it really paints these beautiful pictures of like a 40s, 50s, post depression Los Angeles, which is where this is set. It kind of has that Salinger, Catcher in the Rye feel. And Henry's like at high school, and it's kind of about that high school life, but it's like, it's that Rye kind of coming of age that you get from Bukowski, and because it's Bukowski, you have that kind of transgressive sort of edge. So this isn't really your basic coming of age story where they come through and then they kiss the girl and they get sat down by by their English teacher and pep talk, and they go to an Ivy League school and they leave behind their family, and this isn't any of that. It's kind of about, you know, he's ostracized because of his acne, and he starts, you know, discovers drinking because of it, and it's one of those things really funny, I think, really funny, but also at the same time there's that kind of hint of sadness because we all know obviously Buck was he enjoyed drinking, and seeing this kind of origin from the character Charles Henry seeing it from Henry kind of coming through, and knowing what happens. It is that kind of sadness, but like I say, it's got that funny kind of irreverent, transgressive kind of feel that you get from one of Buck's works, and you know, it doesn't run away with the girl. It kind of awkward conversations with the girl. And we've all been there, kind of having those awkward kind of in the hallway passing. 1992, Buck was released, so he was kind of like high of his powers at that point. You know, Bukowski was not a slouch by any means, but he was kind of known as a writer at that time, and I think a lot of the stuff in On RYE, it's difficult to kind of, you think about adaptations to the screen. I think it's difficult for On RYE. You couldn't do that On RYE on the screen, but I do wonder, the years ago, I don't know if anyone remembers this, it was James Franco made fully shot, filmed, edited, ready to release Bukowski kind of biopic, and you know, everyone says one Charles Bukowski biopic, wouldn't that be something? It exists, it's there. We'll talk about this later in a later video, but I wonder how much of that James Franco covers in On RYE, because like I said, it's not fully, it's not autobiography. Character's not called Henry Charles Bukowski. Character's called Henry, and that's the kind of things that are different, that we know are different. Touches on kind of the abuse from the dad that we know about from things like Bluebird and some of his other works, some of his, you know, shorter stories, some of his other things as well. He talks in those about the abuse from his father and that kind of ambivalence of his mum, and that's also here. On RYE talks about that as well, but mainly it's that kind of the coming from Germany, the German background, the immigration to America, to Los Angeles, sunny Los Angeles, from, you know, cold Germany. It's cold in Germany. Los Angeles, does it even rain there? I don't know. I've never been, and I have been, kind of drove. I was in it for like an hour. Didn't rain. Does it ever? Rains a lot in Germany. And that kind of like high school time, which is such a malleable time for anyone, and you really get into Charles's head as he's drinking for the first time, Henry's head as he's drinking for the first time, and kind of see how it shapes him, how it kind of moves him into the person that we know now. And like I said, you know, Catcher in the Rye, if you think about Catcher in the Rye, there's some very sadnesses to that. Henry in Catcher in the Rye, his kind of Holden Caulfield in On RYE, similarities between the two characters, both kind of awkward, both kind of high school, both kind of, you know, they really enjoy drinking alcohol at an age it's illegal. And these are the kind of things that shape these characters, that shape the two of them into characters that you can really get behind. And I think that's one of the reasons I like Ham on Rye so much. I think you can really get behind. Oh, obviously, some qualities in Henry you're not really kind of in love with, not really sort of enamored by. But I think there's a lot of things in him that you can get behind. I think there's universal experiences there, and the prose, like I said ages ago, the kind of the prose, that poetic feel that you get from a poem comes through in how it's written. It's rich in texture. It feels quite floating. Does the prose in the book, and it's controversial book. I think it was released around in the 90s over in America. For us Bukowski heads in the UK, that kind of what it was about wasn't seen as cool, so it was released a little bit later. I think 2000 it finally released over here. So obviously I didn't read it when it came out over here. I was into other things at the time, Magic Key, stuff like that. Wasn't really reading much Charles Bukowski when I was 5, but nowadays we've had 26 years to read it, maybe even more, over in England, and you kind of find it and you read it, and like I said, this is his kind of biggest work, and yeah, I just thought it would be exciting if we can have open up discussion about this as well in the comments. I think that would be cool. But I think if you're wanting to get into Bukowski, hopefully I haven't spoiled too much about it. Hopefully there's still some things that you can uncover within the text of the book when you sit down and read as well. I think it really is, like I say, it's his carrot, it's his big one. And I think if you want to read a Bukowski, this is the one you start with, and then you read the other ones afterwards. But you start with this one. I think you get a lot out of it. I think it's a real kind of what's the test where you put the thing in the water and it turns green or purple? Litmus test. It's a real litmus test for whether you like Henry Bukowski's work. It could, turn green for go. It could turn purple for this isn't for me. But if you're going to start with one, I would say Ham on Rye is the one. So that's going to be all that we have for now, Ham on Rye. But I'll be back. I'm thinking about uploading maybe every few days, trying to just get this little discussion going about Bukowski and what we like about him, how we like how he writes and stuff, and that kind of thing. And yeah, I'll speak to you guys soon. I'm Bukowski Boy 687. See you later. I need to think of a snappy little Bukowski outro. But until then, I guess we'll just say see you soon.